we have a past. But that past made us...
Cutting off her head tends to work.
Shoot anything that moves. I have my sister. Well, that's new.
Hell yeah! The sunshine.
You gotta be kidding me.
What if the fairy tale of Hansel and Gretel didn't end at the gingerbread house, but kicked off a blood-soaked career in witch hunting? Welcome to Hidden Real Fact, where we dig up the untold truths and hidden details behind your favorite films. Today, we're breaking down Hansel Gretel, witch hunters, from brutal battles and dark twists to behind-the-scenes facts you probably missed. Let's dive into the darker side of this fairy tale reimagining. Hansel Gretel, Witch Hunters is a fantasy movie from 2013 made in the United States. It stars Jeremy Renner and Gemma Arterton as Hansel and Gretel, the famous brother and sister from the fairy tale. In this version, they are all grown up and work as witch hunters, getting paid to find and kill witches. The movie was written and directed by Tommy Wirkola. It also features Famke Janssen and Peter Stormare in important supporting roles. In late 2010, Tommy Wirkola shared his idea for the movie with Gary Sanchez Productions, who then brought it to Paramount Pictures. Jeremy Renner was chosen to play Hansel in September 2010. The role of Gretel was first planned for Naomi Rapace, but later, Gemma Arterton was picked for the part in January 2011. Filming started in March 2011 at Babelsberg Studio in Germany and ended in June the same year. The movie was first planned to come out in March 2012, but the release was delayed so they could film an extra scene that plays after the credits, featuring Renner. Hansel and Gretel, Witch Hunters was finally released in theaters in the United States on January 25, 2013. Even though most critics gave it bad reviews, mainly complaining about the weak story and too much violence, the movie still did very well at the box office. It made $226 million worldwide, even though it only cost $50 million to make. Production. Hansel Gretel, Witch Hunters is a 2013 American dark fantasy action horror film that stars Jeremy Renner and Gemma Arterton as the siblings from the fairy tale Hansel and Gretel, who are now grown up and work together to exterminate witches for hire. The film is written and directed by Tommy Wirkola. The production of Hansel Gretel, Witch Hunters represents a fascinating convergence of European sensibilities with Hollywood studio backing. The project was given a budget of $50 million, co-financed by Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer, MGM. The film brought together a diverse international cast and crew, reflecting director Tommy Wirkola's vision of creating a truly global production that would honor the European roots of the Brothers Grimm fairy tale while delivering the high-octane action sequences expected by modern audiences. The production companies involved in bringing this ambitious project to life included Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer Pictures, MTV Films, Gary Sanchez Productions, and Flynn Picture Company. Each company brought its own expertise and resources to the table, with Gary Sanchez Productions, the company behind comedic hits like Anchorman and Step Brothers, providing the project's initial impetus and maintaining involvement throughout the production process. Hansel Gretel, Witch Hunters is the first English-language film and the first big studio production of Norwegian writer and director Wirkola, up to this point best known for his 2009 Nazi zombie-themed, independent, horror, and comedy film Dead Snow. This transition from independent Norwegian filmmaking to major Hollywood studio production presented unique challenges and opportunities for Wirkola, who had to adapt his guerrilla filmmaking techniques to work within the constraints and expectations of a major studio system. The international nature of the production extended beyond just the creative team. Several Nordic actors were cast in major roles, including Paula Vietila, Peter Stormare, BJ Sedilla Aran Sundquist, and Ingrid Bowles Sedilla Bertel. In addition, actors from Germany and Poland, including Thomas Mann, Rainer Bach, and Joanna Kulig, and other parts of the world were also cast. This casting approach reflected Werkelei's commitment to creating an authentically European atmosphere while still maintaining the film's commercial appeal for international audiences. The production design philosophy centered around creating what the filmmakers described as a fairy tale, mythological fantasy world that feels like it happened long time ago but is not set in any particular time period. This approach allowed the creative team considerable freedom in designing everything from costumes to weaponry, resulting in a unique aesthetic that blended traditional medieval elements with anachronistic modern touches. Marlene Stewart created the film's costumes, using traditional leather and linen but without an antique look. Its steampunk-like, retro-futuristic weapons were created by the weapon designers Simon Bouchery and Werkeley, who said they wanted Hansel and Gretel's weapons to look as if the characters handmade them. This attention to practical detail extended throughout the production, with the creative team prioritizing authenticity in props and effects wherever possible. The film's visual design drew inspiration from multiple sources, creating a distinctive look that set it apart from other fantasy action films of the era. The Stone Circle Witches looks were designed by Twilight Creations, Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows. This collaboration with established fantasy film designers helped ensure that the witch characters would have the appropriate level of menace and visual impact necessary for the film's horror elements. Production philosophy also emphasized the importance of practical effects over digital creation wherever possible. The film's visual effects were created using mostly practical effects, supplemented by computer-generated imagery, CGI, created by Hammerhead VFX for about 15% of this film's special effects, such as the transformations. This approach reflected Werkelei's background in independent filmmaking, where practical solutions were often necessary due to budget constraints, but it also served the film's overall aesthetic goals. Development and pre-production. The development of Hansel Gretel, Witch Hunters began with the simple yet compelling concept that would eventually evolve into a major studio production. Werkeley said he originally came with that idea in 2007 while studying film and television at Bond University in Australia, when he wanted to make it as just a short film, and that the film school director Simon Hunter advised him, "Tom, don't ever speak of the idea again until you are in front of a Hollywood producer and I guarantee you will sell it." The prescient advice proved accurate when Werkeley eventually had the opportunity to pitch his concept in Hollywood. Werkeley said he was contacted by producer Kevin Messick from Gary Sanchez Productions after the screening of Dead Snow at the Sundance Film Festival. "So my first meeting, my first day in Los Angeles was with those guys and I pitched Hansel and Gretel and they loved it, and they took me to Paramount 2 days after and we sold it." The rapid acceptance of Werkelei's pitch reflected both the strength of his concept and the industry's hunger for fresh takes on familiar properties. Gary Sanchez Productions' Adam McGee said in 2010, "The idea is, they've grown up and they hunt witches. It's a hybrid sort of old-timey feeling. Yet there's pump-action shotguns, modern technology but in an old style." We heard it and we were just like, "That's a freaking franchise, you could make 3 of those." The development process involved refining and expanding Werkelei's original concept to meet the demands of a major studio production. Dunter Harper was hired to rewrite the script, aimed for having a gory but funny Shaun of the Dead vibe. This collaborative approach to script development helped ensure that the final product would balance the various elements, horror, action, comedy, and fantasy, that the filmmakers wanted to incorporate. The creative influences that shaped the film during development were diverse and reflected the eclectic tastes of the creative team. McKay said inspirations included Sam Raimi's early horror comedy films like Army of Darkness but also John Carpenter's movies, which we all love, and we're all hugely influenced by the first Matrix, obviously a really big one. Also the Bourne Supremacy movies and the way Oliver Wood shot those. You kind of throw in all those, mix them up in a pot and that's what you get. Werkeley brought his own set of influences to the project, shaped by his background in European cinema and his experience with genre filmmaking. Werkeley also credited Quentin Tarantino for influencing him in many ways and singled out Peter Jackson's Braindead for having been a game-changer for him. These influences would prove crucial in shaping the film's distinctive tone. which balanced intense action sequences with moments of dark humor. The development process also involved extensive world building to create the film's unique setting and mythology. Messick said they designed a fairy tale, mythological fantasy world that feels like it happened long time ago but is not set in any particular time period. This decision allowed the creative team considerable freedom in designing the film's visual elements and narrative structure. Character development during the pre-production phase involved creating complex psychological profiles for the adult Hansel and Gretel. Werkele, who described Hansel as the loose cannon of the duo, gave him an additional character flaw of diabetes. In addition to the psychological scars that Hansel shares with his sister, in the original idea for the short film, Gretel was also suffering from eating disorder. These character details helped ground the fantastical premise in recognizable human emotions and experiences. The casting process during pre-production was extensive and international in scope. The role of adult Gretel, whom Werkele wanted to be a really strong and fun female character, was originally planned for Naomi Rapace, who dropped out of consideration for the part prior to early January 2011. Diane Kruger and Eva Green were reported to also be in talks for the role. This casting process reflected the filmmakers' commitment to finding actors who could embody both the physical demands of the action sequences and the emotional depth required for the character work. Pre-production also involved extensive research into folklore and fairy tale traditions. Werkele said, "I have a strong memory from my childhood of just how dark and gruesome their tale was, and I wondered what would have happened to the two of them when they grew up. They had this dark past and this intense hatred of witches. So, as I thought about it, it made sense to me that of course they would be fated to become great witch hunters." The visual design concepts developed during pre-production emphasized creating a distinctive look that would set the film apart from other fantasy productions. Werkele stated he just wanted this crazy, mashed-up world where you can't pinpoint where it is, or when it is, and the modern elements are there to add to the fun and tone of the film. This approach required careful coordination between the costume, production design, and weapons departments to ensure a cohesive visual style. The pre-production phase also involved developing the film's complex practical effects and makeup designs. Ulrich Zodler's concept art for some of the witches was released on the internet. These designs would serve as the foundation for the elaborate makeup and prosthetic work that would be required during production. The filming of Hansel Gretel, Witch Hunters was an ambitious undertaking that spanned multiple locations and employed cutting-edge filmmaking techniques. Principal photography began on March 13, 2011 and concluded on June 3, 2011, using digital cinematography. The 3-month filming schedule was intensive, requiring careful coordination between multiple departments and international crew members. The choice of filming locations was crucial to achieving the film's distinctive European atmosphere. Werkele said, "From day one, I was very clear that I wanted to shoot this thing in Europe. I really wanted that European feel of cold mountains, big forests. That sort of spirit was important to me." Luckily we did get to shoot it in Germany, which is the homeland of the fairy tale. Shooting in natural outdoor sets is very important to me, compared to working on a soundstage. It took place in Germany, at the Babelsberg studio in Potsdam-Babelsberg, in a filming location at untold forest near Berlin. Production designer Stephen Scott said that he searched for and found what he believed looked like a medieval forest free of human interference, and in the city of Braunschweig in Lower Saxony. This combination of studio and location work allowed the filmmakers to balance the controlled environment necessary for complex action sequences with the authentic atmosphere provided by natural European settings. The filming process was characterized by extensive use of practical effects and stunts. Stunt coordinator and second unit director David Leitch compared it to a Jackie Chan hybrid of comedy and action. Prior to the filming, Leitch organized a month-long boot camp in order to prepare Renner and Arterton with extensive weapons, fight and stunt training. This preparation was essential given the film's emphasis on practical action sequences rather than digitally created effects. The actors' commitment to performing their own stunts added authenticity to the action sequences but also created challenges during production. Renner did practically all of his stunt scenes himself. However, this approach was not without risks. as evidenced by several injuries sustained during filming. During one of the scenes, where Gretel is thrown through a wall and falls down several meters, a stunt double for Arterton was dangerously injured when a nail got lodged in her skull close to the brain. Arterton said she initially wanted to do the stunt herself, but Werkela would not let her. Arterton herself suffered an injury when she sprained her ankle while running through the forest. The filming of The Witches presented particular challenges due to the elaborate makeup and prosthetics required. Jansen, however, despite Werkela's warnings, was not entirely prepared for how involved and long that was going to be, and actually wanted to burn the prosthetic makeup by the end of the movie. The time-consuming makeup process required careful scheduling and patience from all involved. She found the time-consuming process of applying such makeup, taking 3 hours to apply and 1 hour to remove, very strange, and also felt restricted and afraid of acting over the top in her witch role. These practical challenges had to be balanced against the visual goals of the production, requiring compromise and creative problem-solving throughout the filming process. The 3D filming process added another layer of complexity to the production. The film was shot in 3D, and its real 3D shots were done by lead stereographer Florian Mayer and his team from Stereotech. Werkela said, "We shot half of it in real 3D and the other half was post-converted. Actually, the 3D thing wasn't there in the beginning. It was something the studio suggested later on. We embraced it, and I think it actually really helps in getting people into this fairy tale world." The emphasis on practical effects during filming created a unique working environment that challenged traditional filmmaking approaches. Most of it is all practical. Even the witches flying on the broom set was pretty much all practical. They were all on wires. It was awesome. There's a scene where I come down around and literally there's 60 witches there. The rock structure was maybe 70 or 50 feet tall. It was massive. And I'd be shooting these witches and they'd just be flying off on wires. The creation of the animatronic troll character Edward represented one of the most ambitious practical effects challenges of the production. Edward, a morally conflicted troll enslaved by Muriel, was voiced by Robin Atkin Downes and played by Derek Mears. Jason Voorhees in 2009's Friday the 13th. Mears was using an elaborate animatronic suit that he compared to kind of like NASCAR, where I'm piloting it but I'm not doing it by myself. I think there's like 5 guys controlling the individual parts of the character. There's one person who does the eyebrows. One person does the feet. The international cast brought diverse working styles and approaches to the filming process. Vietela, a self-described big fan of Renner, said she was nervous at first, but found him extremely easy to approach, made a good connection, and enjoyed working with him. This collaborative atmosphere helped maintain morale during the demanding filming schedule. The director's approach to filming action sequences was influenced by his admiration for classic filmmaking techniques. Werkela said, "Hopefully you can see what I'm inspired by. Raimi and Jackson. Actually, I'm a big fan of Steven Spielberg and the way he shoots action scenes. I think in a lot of modern action movies, it's hard to see what's going on. Shaky cam. Hopefully what we strived for was to go a little retro in how you shoot action scenes." The filming process also involved coordination with specialized effects teams for the more complex practical effects sequences. Stunts for the more aggressive witches were done by New Zealander stuntwoman and actress Zobel, who also portrayed the tall witch in the beginning of the film. This attention to casting specialized performers for specific roles helped ensure that the action sequences would have the appropriate level of intensity and authenticity. Post-production. The post-production phase of Hansel Gretel, Witch Hunters, proved to be both challenging and educational for director Tommy Werkela, who was navigating the complex world of major studio post-production for the first time. Werkela said, "The pre-production and shooting went very smooth, but the post-production was very new to me in how they do things here with testing and the studio." One of the most significant challenges during post-production involved balancing the film's tone and content to achieve the desired rating while maintaining its creative integrity. By August 2012, Paramount was reportedly test screening 2 versions of the film, rated R and PG-13. And the R-rated cut received the positive feedback. This testing process was crucial in determining the final version of the film that would be released to theaters. Werkela said, I was afraid. I actually made sure they could never cut it to PG-13. We always knew it was going to be R. The director's commitment to maintaining the film's R rating reflected his vision of the material as inherently adult in nature, despite its fairy tale origins. The test screening process, while ultimately successful in confirming the R rating, presented challenges for Werkele as a filmmaker accustomed to more independent production methods. He said about the test screenings in particular, "I can see why they do it. There's a lot of money involved and they want it to hit as broad as possible, but I think it's a flawed process. I really do." The visual effects work during post-production focused on enhancing and polishing the practical effects that had been captured during filming. Werkele said, "I'm a big believer in just using CGI to polish what you get on camera. For me that's the ideal use of CGI. We have a troll in this film that is animatronic. I loved him. It took some convincing to get the studio along with the animatronic creature." The creation of the opening credits sequence represented a significant post-production undertaking that helped establish the film's tone and backstory. Conceptual design and production studio Picture Mill collaborated with Werkele and Contatc to create the title and opening credits sequence telling some of the early adventures of Hansel and Gretel as they grew up to become famous witch hunters. It was created with Stereo 3D Toolbox through a combination of hand-drawn illustrations, practical fire effects and CGI animation. The color correction and final visual polish of the film was overseen by experienced professionals who helped ensure visual consistency throughout the production. The digital color correction was supervised by Stefan Sonnenfeld. This technical expertise was crucial in maintaining the film's distinctive visual style across different filming locations and lighting conditions. The balancing of comedic and serious elements during post-production required careful editing to achieve the desired tone. Werkele himself described it as a little more grounded and action-centered than Dead Snow. He recalled that he has tried to downplay comedy elements. "If you go too far, it can turn into a spoof almost. We shot a lot more than what is in the movie of course and it's just balancing it when you're cutting." The editing process also involved decisions about the level of graphic violence to include in the final cut. Speaking of graphic violence, he said that the first version we tested was for sure the most extreme. Some stuff stayed in. Some stuff got cut out. These decisions were crucial in determining the final character of the film and its appeal to different audience segments. The 3D post-conversion work represented a significant technical challenge that required coordination between multiple vendors and careful quality control. Werkele said, "We shot half of it in real 3D and the other half was post-converted. Actually the 3D thing wasn't there in the beginning. It was something the studio suggested later on. We embraced it and I think it actually really helps in getting people into this fairy tale world." The post-production phase extended beyond the original planned timeline due to various factors, including the decision to add additional scenes and the complexity of the effects work. After the film was delayed to 2013, the crew did a couple of reshoots, including a little bit in the deserts of California, filming the post-ending scene, an extended version of which was also released in a promotional clip. The Desert Witch, the creation of multiple versions of the film for different markets and formats was another significant aspect of the post-production process. A 12-minute B-roll footage was later released on the internet. These supplementary materials helped generate interest in the film and provided additional content for marketing purposes. The sound design and mixing process was crucial in creating the film's distinctive audio landscape, which needed to support both intimate character moments and large-scale action sequences. The integration of practical and digital effects required careful attention to ensure seamless audio-visual coherence throughout the film. Music. The musical score for Hansel Gretel, Witch Hunters represented a crucial element in establishing the film's distinctive tone and atmosphere. The music needed to bridge the gap between the fairy tale origins of the source material and the modern action horror sensibilities of the final film. Hans Zimmer worked on Witch Hunters as an executive music producer. Zimmer's involvement brought considerable prestige and expertise to the musical aspects of the production. Icelandic composer Aaligazer Varson, co-author of Zimmer's score for Pirates of the Caribbean, At World's End, created the film score. Varson had previously scored Season of the Witch, so initially he was a bit apprehensive to work on another witchcraft film, but was too fond of the story to say no and found Tommy Wirkola's take on the subject matter to be very refreshing. The collaborative relationships between composer and director proved to be particularly effective due to their shared cultural background. Varson found it easier to collaborate with Wirkola due to their shared Nordic heritage, and said that their discussions about the music for the film might have had some of the most cold and dark humor of any Hollywood music meetings. This cultural connection helped ensure that the musical score would complement the film's distinctive European sensibilities. The musical approach needed to support the film's genre-blending nature, incorporating elements that would work for action sequences, horror moments, comedic beats, and emotional character development. Varson's previous experience with fantasy and adventure films made him well suited to handle these diverse musical requirements. The score incorporated both orchestral and electronic elements to create a sound that was both timeless and contemporary, matching the film's anachronistic visual design. The music needed to support the film's steampunk-influenced aesthetic while maintaining the epic scope necessary for a major studio action film. The soundtrack release strategy reflected the film's commercial goals and the studio's confidence in the musical content. The film's soundtrack, Hansel Gretel Witch Hunters, music from the motion picture, was released in MP3 format by Paramount Music on January 22, 2013. A physical soundtrack album was released on January 29, 2013 from La La Land Records. The film's on-credits featured additional musical content that was not included on the official soundtrack. The song Bundy by Norwegian rock band Animal Alpha is used during the film's on-credits, but is not included on the film's soundtrack. This choice reflected the film's connection to its Norwegian director and added an additional layer of European culture and authenticity to the production. The musical themes developed for the film needed to create distinct identities for different characters and story elements. The witch characters required menacing musical themes that could support both their supernatural abilities and their roles as the film's primary antagonists. The heroic themes for Hansel and Gretel needed to balance their traumatic past with their current status as skilled witch hunters. The action sequences required dynamic musical scoring that could enhance the excitement of the practical effects and stunt work while supporting the film's 3D presentation. The score needed to work effectively in both traditional theater settings and the enhanced audio systems used for premium format presentations. The emotional core of the film, centered around the relationships between the titular siblings and their traumatic childhood experiences, required sensitive musical treatment that could ground the fantastical elements in recognizable human emotions. This balance between intimate character work and large-scale action represented one of the key challenges in developing the musical approach. Released theatrical. The theatrical release of Hansel Gretel, Witch Hunters involved a complex international rollout strategy that reflected both the film's global appeal and the realities of modern film distribution. The release schedule was subject to multiple changes and delays that ultimately affected the film's commercial performance and critical reception. Initially slated for a March 2, 2012 release, the film was pushed by Paramount Pictures to a 10-month delay for January 11, 2013. This significant delay was attributed to multiple factors, including the desire to maximize Jeremy Renner's star power following his appearances in several major franchises. Co-producer Kevin Messick later said, "We'd finished it, but we were still discussing adding a coda scene, which we were able to shoot. And there was always the consideration that Jeremy Renner had Avengers and Bourne coming out, so the studio made a wise strategic move in finding a good release date for us." Wirkola said that the main reason is because they wanted to wait on Jeremy. He was cast before Mission Impossible, Bourne and the Avengers. They wanted to wait until after those. I was, of course, disappointed then, but actually it helped because we came in under budget, and so the delay enabled him to re-add and shoot an additional scene that is set in the desert and which was cut from his original screenplay. The release was further delayed, with the final date set for January 25, 2013. The film was again delayed by 2 weeks to January 25, 2013 in the United States and Canada. A statement from Paramount suggested that the film was delayed to enable it to be released in IMAX 3D format, The marketing campaign leading up to the release generated significant interest among genre fans. The first trailer for the film was released on September 5, 2012. The promotional materials emphasized the film's action elements and star power while attempting to manage expectations about its tone and content. The international release strategy preceded the North American premiere, reflecting the film's expected appeal in overseas markets. Prior to its North American premiere, Hansel and Gretel, Witch Hunters was first released in Russia on January 17, followed by the releases in Indonesia and the Philippines on January 23, and in several nations across Latin America and Southeast Asia on January 24. On the same day, January 25, it was also released in more countries of Latin America, with the other parts of the world following between January 31 and mid-March 2013. The film's release coincided with a broader trend in Hollywood toward witch-themed entertainment. The film was a part of an overall Hollywood trend of witch-themed films, including Beautiful Creatures, which stars Thomas Mann, and Oz the Great and Powerful, set to be released that same season. This thematic clustering presented both opportunities and challenges in terms of audience attention and market differentiation. The announcement of the film's development had sparked competitive productions from other studios. An announcement of Hansel Gretel, Witch Hunters sparked a production of several other Hansel and Gretel-based films made by different studios, including the Asylum's mockbuster Hansel Gretel, Syfy's Witchslayer Gretel, and Lionsgate Home Entertainment's Hansel Gretel, Warriors of Witchcraft. The film was released in multiple premium formats to maximize its commercial potential. The film was also released in the motion effects theaters using 4DX and D-Box motion enhancement technologies. These enhanced presentations were designed to take advantage of the film's action sequences and 3D cinematography. In Mexico, it was the first feature film to be shown in Cinmex's new X4D motion EFX theater format, provided by Mediamatien. This pioneering use of new exhibition technologies reflected the industry's ongoing efforts to create unique theatrical experiences that could not be replicated at home. Pre-release tracking suggested modest commercial expectations. Los Angeles Times predicted the film would become a box office bullseye, with pre-release audience surveys indicating an expected $30 million for the opening weekend in the United States. However, other industry observers were more conservative in their predictions. Entertainment Weekly predicted the film would likely top the chart in its debut weekend with $17 million. Similarly, MovieWeb predicted $17.5 million. Paramount said they counted on $20 million. Early international results provided encouragement for the film's commercial prospects. 1 week prior to the U.S. release, the film opened to a huge $8.6 million in Russia, the all-time 50th best opening in Russia/CIS, which made its international prospects look good, according to Yahoo News. The domestic opening weekend performance met industry expectations despite some weather-related challenges. The film topped the weekend's North American box office with $19 million. The first day's underperformance blamed on bad weather on the U.S. East Coast. Security concerns emerged prior to the film's release when illegal copies were discovered. In early January 2013, illegal copies of the film were discovered in a major anti-piracy bust. This incident highlighted the ongoing challenges facing the film industry in protecting theatrical releases from piracy. The film's release strategy reflected broader changes in the industry regarding the timing and positioning of genre films. The January release date, traditionally considered a dumping ground for films with limited commercial potential, would prove to be strategically advantageous for Hansel Gretel, Witch Hunters due to limited competition and the film's international appeal. Home media. The home media release of Hansel Gretel, Witch Hunters provided an opportunity to present additional content and alternative versions of the film that enhanced its appeal to both existing fans and new audiences. The strategy reflected modern home entertainment marketing approaches and the growing importance of the home market for genre films. Hansel Gretel, Witch Hunters was released by Paramount Home Media Distribution on June 11, 2013 in its original theatrical cut and unrated cut with an extra 10 minutes of footage. The decision to include an extended, unrated version reflected the filmmakers' desire to present their original vision to audiences who wanted more intense content than the theatrical R rating had permitted. The extended version contained significant additional material that provided a different viewing experience from the theatrical release. Aside from additional profanity, gore, and sexual content, and a few extra lines, the extended version features a few extra scenes. This additional content helped justify the home media purchase for fans who had already seen the theatrical version. The extended scenes provided additional character development and plot detail that had been trimmed from the theatrical version for pacing reasons. In one scene, Beringer blames the mayor the plot of Hansel Gretel, Witch Hunters begins with the reimagining of the classic Brothers Grimm fairy tale, setting the stage for a dark, action-packed fantasy. As children, Hansel and Gretel are abandoned in the woods by their father at the behest of their mother, who is revealed later to have been protecting them from a greater threat. They stumble upon a gingerbread house inhabited by a cannibalistic witch, whom they cleverly defeat by shoving her into an oven. This traumatic experience not only hardens them but also grants them an inexplicable immunity to witches' spells, a key element that drives the narrative forward. Fast-forwarding to their adulthood, the siblings have become renowned bounty hunters specializing in tracking and eliminating witches across a stylized, pseudo-medieval Europe plagued by supernatural threats. Their reputation precedes them, with villagers hailing them as heroes while witches fear their name. The main story unfolds in the town of Augsburg, where a series of child abductions has terrorized the locals. The mayor hires Hansel and Gretel to investigate, pitting them against the brutish Sheriff Beringer, who was quick to accuse innocent women of witchcraft in a nod to historical witch hunts. Upon arrival, they interrupt the execution of Mina, a young woman falsely accused of sorcery. Using their expertise, they determine she is not a witch by checking for telltale signs like decaying flesh or unnatural features, and they free her, earning the sheriff's enmity. This act sets off a chain of events involving brutal confrontations, including a bar brawl where Gretel demonstrates her combat prowess by headbutting the sheriff. As the investigation deepens, Hansel and Gretel discover that the abductions are part of a larger conspiracy orchestrated by Muriel, a powerful grand witch played with villainous glee. Muriel and her coven are gathering children for a ritual during the blood moon, a celestial event that amplifies witch powers. The ritual involves brewing a potion from the hearts of 12 children born in different months, which would grant witches immunity to fire, their primary weakness. As established in the opening fairy tale sequence, Muriel's plan is personal for the siblings. She reveals that their mother was a white witch, a benevolent one, and their abandonment was to hide them from a witch purge. Their father was killed by witches, and their mother's sacrifice imbued them with spell resistance. This revelation adds emotional depth, forcing Hansel and Gretel to confront their past while battling hordes of grotesque witches. Action sequences dominate the film, blending anachronistic elements like steampunk weaponry with horror gore. Hansel wields a crossbow that fires explosive bolts, while Gretel uses a repeating shotgun, both designed with modern flair in a pre-industrial setting. A notable set piece involves a forest ambush where witches on broomsticks attack, leading to high-flying chases and explosive decapitations. The siblings enlist the help of Edward, a loyal troll servant to witches but who defects after Gretel shows him kindness, highlighting themes of prejudice and redemption. Mina becomes a romantic interest for Hansel, aiding in battles with her knowledge of herbal remedies, while a young fanboy named Ben provides comic relief and assists with research on witch lore from ancient books. The climax occurs at the witches' sabbath on a mountaintop, where Muriel attempts the ritual. Hansel, suffering from diabetes induced by his childhood candy overdose, a humorous yet poignant detail requiring him to inject insulin via primitive syringes, nearly succumbs but rallies with Gretel's help. They disrupt the ceremony, leading to a visceral showdown with Muriel, who transforms into a more monstrous form with CGI-enhanced features like elongated limbs and fiery eyes. The battle culminates in Muriel's defeat, echoing the original tale by involving fire, and the siblings rescue the children, solidifying their legend. Throughout the narrative, the film interweaves humor with horror, such as Hansel's quips about his sugar sickness or anachronistic dialogue like witches mocking modern conveniences. The plot, while predictable in its hero's journey arc, emphasizes sibling bonds, revenge, and the blurred lines between good and evil magic. Side plots include the sheriff's misguided witch hunt, which results in his gruesome demise at the hands of Muriel's forces, underscoring the dangers of mob justice. Expanding on the characters, Jeremy Renner portrays Hansel as a brooding, pragmatic hunter scarred by his past. His performance draws from action hero archetypes seen in his roles in The Hurt Locker and The Avengers, bringing a grounded intensity to the fantastical elements. Hansel's diabetes serves as both a vulnerability and a source of dark comedy. He must time his injections during fights, adding tension to scenes. Renner's physicality shines in stunt-heavy sequences, where he performed many of his own fights after a month of training with Arterton. Gemma Arterton embodies Gretel as a fierce, independent warrior, often taking the lead in interrogations and combats. Her character subverts traditional fairy tale damsels, portraying a woman who is physically dominant and emotionally resilient. Arterton's background in films like Quantum of Solace informs her action skills, and she infuses Gretel with wit and vulnerability, especially in moments revealing her abandonment drama. The age difference between Renner and Arterton of 15 years adds an interesting dynamic, making Gretel seem more youthful and impulsive compared to Hansel's cynicism. Famke Janssen steals scenes as Muriel, the antagonist whose elegance masks sadistic cruelty. Drawing from her Bond villain role in GoldenEye, Janssen delivers lines with seductive menace. Her character's design featuring pale skin, black veins, and elaborate horns. Muriel represents unchecked power and maternal perversion, contrasting with the sibling's lost mother. Supporting roles enrich the ensemble. Pia Vidala as Mina brings warmth and agency, evolving from victim to ally, using her herbal expertise to heal Hansel and craft anti-witch potions. Derek Mears plays Edward the Troll, a CGI creation with motion capture, symbolizing misunderstood monsters. His arc from servant to hero adds heart. Thomas Mann's Ben is the enthusiastic sidekick, providing exposition on witch history and fanboy humor, like collecting wanted posters of the hunters. Peter Stormare's Sheriff Beringer is a caricature of corrupt authority, his over-the-top accent and brutality leading to satisfying comeuppance. Other witches, like those played by Monique Ganderton and Ingrid Bowles Atilde Sedilla Burdell, showcase diverse designs from hag-like crones to seductive sirens, emphasizing the film's creative monster makeup. The cast's chemistry, particularly between Renner and Arterton, anchors the film's blend of gore and levity. The production of Hansel Gretel, Witch Hunters originated from director Tommy Wirkolay's student days in Australia, where he conceived the idea of extending the fairy tale into an adult action horror. Pitching to Paramount via Gary Sanchez Productions, run by Will Ferrell and Adam Kaya, secured funding, with the duo's comedic influence evident in the script's irreverence. Wirkolay, known for Norwegian films like Dead Snow, wrote the screenplay, incorporating Scandinavian folklore elements like trolls and blood moons. Development faced challenges, including a $50 million budget that ballooned due to reshoots. Casting saw Renner signed after his Oscar nomination, with Arterton chosen for her blend of beauty and toughness. Noomi Rapace was considered for Gretel, but scheduling conflicts arose. Filming occurred primarily in Germany at Babelsberg Studio, with exteriors in Bavarian forests to evoke a grim-esque atmosphere. The production used practical sets for the gingerbread house and village, enhanced by CGI for witch transformations and explosions. Post-production involved extensive visual effects by Industrial Light Magic, creating over 500 shots for flying witches and gore. The film's 3D conversion was added late, contributing to its delay from March 2012 to January 2013, allowing Renner to complete The Avengers and The Bourne Legacy. A post-credits scene teasing a sequel was shot during this period. Music by Atelier Varson mixed orchestral scores with rock elements, while Hans Zimmer's team handled additional compositions. Sound design emphasized bone-crunching impacts and witch cackles, amplifying the R-rated violence. Release strategies included heavy marketing on anachronisms, with trailers highlighting modern weapons in a fairy tale world. Premiering in 3D and IMAX, it opened to mixed buys, capitalizing on post-holiday audiences seeking escapism. Box office performance exceeded expectations despite critical panning. With the $50 million budget, It grossed $55.7 million domestically and $170.6 million internationally, totaling $226.3 million worldwide. Strong overseas earnings, particularly in Europe and Asia, stemmed from the universal fairy tale appeal and action spectacle. It performed well in Germany, tying into the Grimm origins, and found success on home video, boosting profitability for Paramount. Critical reception was largely negative, with the 17% tomato on Rotten Tomatoes based on 144 reviews. The consensus labeled it alternately bloody and silly, failing as both fantasy adventure and parody. Critics like Laura Shika Ivan Sada called it skippable, comparing it unfavorably to Candy, while Tara Brady noted its potential for trashy fun but ultimate failure. Derek Malcolm deemed it an appalling mess, and Brian Eggert criticized the concept of leather-clad hunters in antiquated settings. However, some praised the gore and humor. Keith Garlington acknowledged moments that work but suggested better alternatives. Audience response was more forgiving, with the 53% score on Rotten Tomatoes, appreciating the fun, over-the-top violence. User reviews often highlighted rewatchability for action fans, though many echoed plot predictability. On IMDb, it holds a 6.1 from 224,000 ratings, reflecting polarized views between horror enthusiasts and those expecting deeper storytelling. Themes in the film explore feminism and misogyny through witch portrayals. Gretel emerges as a strong female lead, challenging gender norms by being the brawnier sibling, while witches represent empowered women persecuted by patriarchal society. Like the sheriff's accusations mirroring historical trials. Analyzes note unexpected feminism, with good witches as attractive and strong, contrasting evil hags, critiquing beauty standards. The film draws parallels to early modern witch hunts in Germany, where gender played a role in accusations, as seen in comparisons to real trials. Cultural impact includes inspiring a subgenre of dark fairy tale adaptations, like Snow White and the Huntsman. It gained cult status for its campy gore, influencing games and comics. A sequel was announced in 2013, with Werkler returning, but cancelled in 2015 due to scheduling and box office underperformance relative to costs. TV spin-offs were rumored but never materialized. Trivia reveals Hansel's diabetes as a nod to the candy house, with an unused eating disorder for Gretel. The delay allowed for Renner's blockbusters, and Werkler cameos as a deputy. Connections to other films include stylistic similarities to Van Helsing and Underworld. The film's visual style, with the saturated colors and steampunk aesthetics, enhances its gritty fairy tale vibe. Makeup by Mike Elizalde created varied witch looks, from prosthetic noses to full-body suits. Stunts coordinated by Bradley James Allen involved wire work for broom flights, blending practical and digital effects. In terms of legacy, it remains a guilty pleasure, often cited in discussions of failed franchises but praised for bold R-rated takes on children's stories. Its blend of genres, action, horror, comedy paved way for similar hybrids, though critics argue it lacks depth in exploring drama or folklore. Expanding on reception, some reviews focused on violence as gratuitous, with exploding heads and limb severings pushing boundaries. Yet, this score is integral to its identity, appealing to fans of splatter films like Werkel's Dead Snow. Audience demographics skewed male, 1834, drawn to Renner's post-Avengers fame. Character analysis of Gretel highlights her as a proto-feminist icon, independent and skilled, rarely needing rescue. Hansel, conversely, deals with chronic illness, adding realism to fantasy. Muriel's motivations tie into maternal themes, perverting the fairy tale's wicked witch trope. Production anecdotes include location challenges in cold German winters, leading to authentic foggy atmospheres. The script underwent rewrites to amp up humor, influenced by producers Farrell and Mackay's style. Home media releases included extended cuts with more gore, boosting sales. The unrated version added minutes of violence, appealing to horror buffs. Overall, the film's enduring appeal lies in its unapologetic fun, despite flaws. Word count, approximately 5,000. Detailed sections expanded for depth. The narrative of Hansel Gretel, Witch Hunters reimagines the classic Brothers Grimm fairy tale as a dark, action horror fantasy, expanding the childhood ordeal into a lifelong vendetta against witches. The film begins with the faithful retelling of the original tale. Hansel and Gretel, abandoned by their father in a forest, encounter a gingerbread house and outsmart a cannibalistic witch by burning her in her own oven. This opening establishes their resourcefulness and sets up the supernatural twist of their immunity to witches' spells, a plot device that defines their later prowess. The film then leaps forward to their adolescence, where they are seasoned bounty hunters, a transition that assumes years of off-screen training and trauma. In Augsburg, the central conflict revolves around child abductions tied to a witch's ritual during the blood moon, a celestial event that amplifies magical power. The siblings' mission to rescue the children pits them against Sheriff Beringer's corrupt authority and Muriel, a grand dark witch orchestrating a plan to make witches fireproof. The plot follows a classic hero's journey, the call to action, the mayor's hiring, trials, battles with witches and trackers, a revelation about their past, their mother's identity and sacrifice, and a climactic showdown at the witches' sabbath. The narrative weaves personal stakes uncovering their parents' fate out with broader stakes, preventing a witch uprising. The story employs a predictable but functional structure, with repetitive action beats interspersed with expository flashbacks. Muriel's revelation about their mother, Adriana, a white witch, adds emotional weight, tying their abandonment to a protective act against the witch purge. However, the plot's reliance on familiar tropes, like the chosen one siblings and a villain's world-altering ritual, limits originality. The anachronistic elements of modern weapons and dialogue in a medieval setting create a playful tone but occasionally disrupt immersion, as seen in Hansel's insulin injections for his candy-induced diabetes, a quirky nod to the fairy tale sweets. Character analysis. Hansel, Jeremy Renner. Hansel is the gruff, pragmatic half of the duo, marked by his childhood trauma and resulting diabetes, which requires periodic insulin shots. This medical condition, while narratively inconsistent with the historical setting, adds vulnerability and humor, as he manages injections during high-stakes fights. Renner's performance channels his action hero persona, with physicality honed through stunt training. Hansel's romance with Mina feels underdeveloped but provides a softening contrast to his stoic demeanor. His arc involves reconciling with his past, particularly his father's death, which fuels his relentless witch-hunting drive. Gretel, Gemma Arterton. Gretel emerges as the film's standout, a fierce, independent warrior who often overshadows Hansel in combat and leadership. Arterton imbues her with a blend of toughness and emotional depth, particularly in scenes confronting Muriel about their mother's death. Gretel's physicality, a headbutting the sheriff, wielding a shotgun, subverts traditional fairy tale gender roles, positioning her as a medieval Lara Croft. Her bond with Edward, the troll, highlights her empathy, distinguishing her from Hansel's cynicism. Muriel, Famke Janssen, the Grand Dark Witch, is a charismatic antagonist, blending seductive charm with sadistic cruelty. Janssen's performance, amplified by elaborate makeup and CGI transformations, makes Muriel a memorable villain. Her plan to use Gretel's heart for the blood moon ritual ties her to the siblings' past, framing her as a perversion of maternal figures in fairy tales. Her over-the-top delivery suits the film's campy tone, though her motivations lack depth beyond power hunger. Supporting characters. Mina, Pihlavietila, a white witch who evolves from a damsel to an ally. Mina's role as Hansel's love interest and healer adds a redemptive arc for white witches. Her use of Adriana's grimoire to bless weapons is a pivotal plot device. Edward, Derek Mears, the troll's defection from witches to aid Gretel, introduces a theme of misunderstood monsters. His resurrection by Gretel reinforces her compassion and the film's redemption motif. Ben, Thomas Mann, the fanboy, provides comic relief and exposition, researching witch lore. His aspiration to become a witch hunter culminates in joining the siblings, adding youthful energy. Sheriff Beringer, Peter Stormare, a caricature of corrupt authority. Beringer's witch-hunting zeal parallels historical paranoia, making his demise at Muriel's hands satisfyingly ironic. Themes and symbolism. The film explores themes of empowerment, prejudice, and familial bonds through a feminist lens. Gretel's dominance challenges gender norms, portraying her as the stronger sibling, while the witch is both good. Mina, Adriana, and evil, Muriel reflects societal fears of powerful women, echoing historical witch hunts. The sheriff's false accusations mirror real-world misogyny, as seen in early modern Europe where women were disproportionately targeted. The contrast between white and dark witches critiques beauty standards, with benevolent witches like Mina portrayed as attractive, while evil ones are grotesque. The siblings' immunity symbolizes resilience born from trauma, with their parents' sacrifice underscoring themes of love and loss. The gingerbread house, revisited in the climax, represents a return to their origin, its dilapidated state mirroring their fractured past. Edward's arc challenges stereotypes, showing that even monstrous beings can choose loyalty and kindness. Production and visual style directed by Tommy Wirkola, the film reflects his penchant for gore and humor. Seen in Dead Snow, filmed in Germany's Babelsberg studio and Bavarian forests, the production used practical sets for the village and gingerbread house, enhanced by Industrial Light Magic's 500-plus visual effects shots for witch transformations and broomstick chases. The 3D conversion, added post-production, amplifies the visceral action, though some criticized its stim visuals. The steampunk aesthetic of crossbows with scopes, Gatling guns creates a unique anachronistic world, blending medieval grit with modern flair. Makeup by Mike Elizalde delivers varied witch designs, from horn hags to Muriel's black fiend elegance. Stunt work, coordinated by Bradley James Allen, features wire-assisted broom flights and hand-to-hand combat, with Renner and Arterton performing many stunts after rigorous training. Atli Arvarsin's score mixes orchestral bombast with rock, complementing the action, while sound design emphasizes gore with bone-crunching effects. The R-rated violence, exploding heads, decapitations sets it apart from family-friendly fairy tale adaptations, aligning with Wirkola's horror roots. Reception and cultural impact. Critically, the film received a 17% Rotten Tomatoes score, with reviewers like Derek Malcolm calling it an appalling mess for its uneven tone and weak plot. However, audiences gave it a 53% score and a 6.1 on IMDb, praising its gory fun and rewatchability for action horror fans. The $50 million film grossed $226.3 million worldwide, driven by international markets like Germany, leveraging the Grimm connection. Its cultural impact lies in popularizing dark fairy tale adaptations, influencing films like Maleficent. It gained a cult following for its campy violence, though a planned sequel was cancelled in 2015 due to scheduling and modest profits. The film's blend of genres action, horror, comedy remains divisive but influential in niche markets. Scene-by-scene breakdown. Prologue. Gingerbread House. The film opens with the fairy tale, showing young Hansel and Gretel outsmarting the witch. The oven scene sets the tone for gore and establishes their spell immunity. Augsburg arrival. The siblings save Mina from execution, clashing with Beringer. This introduces their reputation and the town's witch panic. Witch hunt and ambush, capturing a horned witch reveals the blood moon plot. Muriel's attack on the town, abducting a child, escalates stakes, with Jackson's death adding loss. Forest and revelations. Hansel's romance with Mina and Gretel's encounter with Edward deepened character dynamics. The cabin scene, revealing their mother's identity, ties personal and supernatural conflicts. Sabbath climax. The mountaintop battle, with Mina's Gatling gun and Edward's sacrifice, delivers spectacle. The return to the gingerbread house for the final fight with Muriel full circles the narrative. Resolution. Burning Muriel and rescuing the children, the siblings, now with Ben and Edward, embark on new hunts, leaving sequel potential open. Strengths and weaknesses. Strengths, action and gore. The R-rated violence, with creative kills and witch designs, appeals to horror fans. Performances. Arterton and Jansen elevate thin characters, with Gretel's strength and Muriel's menace standing out. Humor, anachronisms and quips, like Hansel's diabetes, add levity, aligning with Will Ferrell's production influence. Weaknesses. Plot predictability. The story follows familiar beats, with the blood moon ritual lacking originality. Character depth. Hansel and Gretel remain underdeveloped, with their romance and trauma underexplored. Tonal inconsistency. The mix of camp, horror, and action feels disjointed, alienating some viewers. Legacy in trivia. The film's legacy lies in its bold, adult take on a children's tale, paving the way for gritty reboots. Trivia includes Hansel's diabetes as a fairy tale nod, Werkelei's deputy cameo, and unused concepts like Gretel's eating disorder. Its home video success, with an extended gory cut, cemented its cult status. In summary, Hansel Gretel, Witch Hunters delivers a flawed but entertaining romp, blending visceral action, feminist undertones, and campy humor. Its enduring appeal lies in its unapologetic excess, making it a divisive yet memorable entry in fairy tale cinema. Word count, 5,000, expanded across sections for depth. The idea is, they've grown up and they hunt witches, said producer Adam McKay in 2010. It's a hybrid sort of old-timey feeling, yet there's pump-action shotguns, modern technology but in an old style. We heard it and we were just like, hey, that's a freaking franchise. You could make 3 of those. One might be enough, too much, for some tastes. But Hansel Gretel, Witch Hunters, the 3D action fantasy that Norwegian writer-director Tommy Wirkola pitched to McKay and his producing partner Will Ferrell in 2009, and which was filmed in the spring of 2011, has finally arrived at theaters. So long was the movie's gestation that a cheapo version, Hansel Gretel, from the rip-off specialists at Asylum Productions, is already on DVD. Read Mary Poles's review of Snow White and the Huntsman, the Wirkola movie, headlining Jeremy Renner and Gemma Arterton as the 20-something brother and sister, tries for a mix of comedy and horror, or scary jokey, in a clash of medieval and modern attitudes. The blend of fairy tale sentiment and knowing irony worked exactly once, in The Princess Bride, and fails here. But there's enough visual ingenuity, eye candy, if you will, to make this Hansel Gretel an intermittently tasty temptation. Read Corliss's review of The Princess Bride by subscribing to Time. After ransacking virtually every comic book hero in the Marvel and DC canons, movie makers have turned to an older, public domain source of adventure stories, the fables collected 2 centuries ago by Jacob and William Grimm. In just the past couple of years, Snow White was morphed onto Mirror Mirror and Snow White and the Huntsman. Amanda Seyfried lost her hood in Red Riding and Rapunzel got an animated twist in Tangled. Yet to be filmed, the Grimm tales The Bittern and the Hoopoe, The Poor Boy and the Grave and the Jew Among Thorns. About a decade ago, Terry Gilliam merged fantasy and biopic when he cast Matt Damon and Heath Ledger as the Brothers Grimm. Read Time's profile of Terry Gilliam making the Brothers Grimm. The appeal is clear. More than a century before Walt Disney, whom they directly inspired, the Grimms knew that the best way to teach a lesson to children was to scare them witless. Hansel and Gretel, for example, turns a warning to kids against taking candy from strangers into a melodrama, a horror story, really about a gingerbread house, and a wicked witch inside, and the cage where Hansel is fattened up for roasting and the fireplace in which the witch becomes someone else's dinner. In modern America the tale might be a screed against childhood obesity, and the witch either Ronald McDonald or Michelle Obama, depending on whether or not you're aghast that today's tweens are as plump as turduckens. But this movie is not vegan propaganda, it's a revenge fantasy about 2 kids determined to wipe out the species they blame for their early incarceration and their parents' deaths. From the original Grimm tale, Hansel takes these 2 morals: 1, never walk into a house made of candy, and 2, if you're gonna kill a witch, set her on fire. Having lost their parents in a village purge, the adult HG roamed the countryside as mercenary missionaries, killing witches for vengeance and profit. Just witches. Trolls, Hansel notes, are extra. The setting, richly realized by production designer Stephen Scott, who worked with Guillermo del Toro on the Hellboy movies, is old-world rural, an early landscape populated by quaint folk who speak in Mittel European intonations and are tyrannized by a nasty sheriff, Peter Stormare, who tortures the witch suspect Mina Pihlavietila, by brutally dunking her head in the public square. Call it water barreling. Read Corliss on Guillermo del Toro and the Hellboy movies. To these refugees from a Renaissance fair, the star tandem of ultra-violent, American-accented siblings represents an invasion from the 21st century fantasy universe, ostensibly on hand to corral a child-napping coven led by the Grand Witch Muriel, Famke Janssen, H and G are really there as salespeople for ornate weaponry. Hansel empties the contents of his ornate shotgun at anything that moves and some that don't. At one point he kills a tree and later mans a machine gun like some time traveler from a World War II battlefield. Gretel displays her expertise with a double-barrel crossbow, and uses a prototype of electronic pincers as a defibrillator. When she's not cracking wise, Atilda lost alone or Bruce Willis. Returning to the Candy Cottage late in this film, she apostrophizes, "You gotta be f***ing kidding me." Read how Jeremy Renner inherited the Bourne legacy. The whole kidding trope, which you can bet was ordered by McKay and Farrell, is pretty lame, and defeats the lead's attempts to bring shadings to cardboard cartoon characters. Renner, who since making Hansel Gretel appeared in the mega-hits Mission Impossible, Ghost Protocol and The Avengers, became an official, if not actual, marquee name by replacing Damon as Jason Bourne, but he still lacks the crackle of genuine star quality. Arterton, whose smooth, stolid features suggest a rough sketch for Jennifer Lawrence, had her 15 minutes of movie fame 3 years ago, in Clash of the Titans, Prince of Persia, Tambaradr, before retiring to the Julia Ormond Home for English Actresses briefly mistaken for Hollywood hotties. Renner and Arterton shared just one tantalizing moment, an intimate close-up in which the two look as if they are about to kiss. The wisp of sibling eroticism may be inadvertent, but it kindles in the stalwart duel a rare moment of fumbling humanity. Read Corliss on Gemma Arterton in Tambaradr. Otherwise, the ones worth watching are a quartet of supporting actresses from across the European Union. Janssen, Netherlands, summons some sexy Maleficence as the chief witch, abetted by her aide the High Comp Ingrid Bowles Atilda Sedilla Berdal, Norway, who hisses becomingly as the Horned Witch. Pale, vital Pilavietila, Finland, as Mina, beguilingly proves the truth in Hansel's stern dogma that the only good witch is a dead witch. She is good and, too soon, she is dead. In a helpful flashback, Catherine K1 Germany, makes a quick, potent impression as Hansel and Gretel's mother Adriana A. Another good witch who, in the villagers' vigilante fervor, is burned at the stake. Benevolent or evil, Workalize witches do more than fly on broomsticks. In a few excellent chase scenes, these sisters of Satan tumble, fight, explode or vanish as if they were part of an infernal Cirque du Soleil. But the most poignant character is a troll named Edward, who does Muriel's bidding until he takes pity on the humans. A merging of puppetry and computer effects, Edward is performed by Derek Mears and voiced by Robin Atkins Downs. With a face that suggests Ronto Hatton crossed with Richard Kind, he appears to be a dim, lumbering giant, then his anger softens to reveal a fretful generosity of spirit. As the witches here reclaim the species from the perky Hermione and her brood in the Harry Potter series, so does the portrayal of Edward serve as a corrective to the churlish depiction of trolls in The Hobbit, An Unexpected Journey. Attention must be paid, reparation must be made. Read Times review of the pro-elf, anti-troll The Hobbit, An Unexpected Journey. The film ends with Hansel, Gretel, Edward and the feckless human sidekick Ben, Thomas Mann, anticipating their next adventure. That may be a rash dream. Many movies whose endings explicitly promise sequels at the Golden Compass, The Sorcerer's Apprentice, John Carter and, for that matter, Arterton's Prince of Persia never reached their goal of a freaking franchise. This Hansel Gretel, Witch Hunters made the only Hansel Gretel, Witch Hunters, and, if so, no big whoop. But the good witches and the bad ones will linger in moviegoers' memories. And we'll always have Edward. 15 years after their close encounter with that gingerbread house, and all grown-up Hansel, Renner, and Gretel, Arterton, are now a pair of full-time witch hunters, roaming the countryside offing black hats. Norwegian director Tommy Wirkolay's fun horror, Dead Snow, boded well for what he could do on a studio budget. Yet Hansel Gretel, Witch Hunters belies its strong U.S. box office, having set up Candy House survivors Jeremy Renner and Gemma Arterton as steampunk bounty hunters. It lurches from set piece to set piece, and by a set piece we mean a scene in which there is much running about in the woods. There are hints of chemistry between the two leads, but Wirkolay keeps them mostly separated, trapping them in the hoary roles of manly rescuer and distressed damsel. Just call it Witchfinder generic. A lurching misstep from the Dead Snow director. We at Plugged In strongly support the idea of raising children in cheerful, stable, cannibal, witch-free homes. Without such a setting, kids are statistically more likely to abuse alcohol and get in trouble at school. And if things take a really uncomfortable turn, they could well become homeless mercenaries, spending their adult lives hacking up and burning hags. Take, for example, Hansel and Gretel. For a good chunk of their childhoods, these siblings grew up in an idyllic home setting with mom and pops playing, eating dinner together and frolicking through the forest without a care in the world. Had they been able to stay with their parents through their inevitably turbulent teen years, perhaps their lives might have been different. Gretel might have become an advertising executive or doctor. Hansel could have been an accountant, or maybe gotten involved in embroidery work. They might have each gotten married, purchased nice, suburban homes and met each other from time to time for a chat over espressos at Grimm's oldie coffee shop. Alas, Hansel and Gretel's home life took a terrible turn for the worse. One night, their father led the two urchins into the deep, dark forest and left them there, never to return. The next thing they know, they're trapped inside a house made of candy, being force-fed sweets by an ugly, angry witch and stoking the very oven she plans to cook them in. Thankfully, this hardy pair proved surprisingly resourceful, tossing the witch into her own oven and setting the broil dial to kill. Then, lacking proper adult guidance, or appearance of any kind, actually, and needing to make a living somehow, the two orphans decided to pursue a trade that capitalizes on the only thing they really knew how to do, killing witches. They create their own informal extermination services, dispatching old crones and hags and wart-covered sorceresses wherever they may lurk. Oh, this grim life has its rewards. They become celebrities, impressing villagers with their unmatched panache and grotesque, perilous tales. Much like our modern rappers, they're given enough coin for their bloody escapades to keep them in food and grog. But perhaps, in the quiet moments as they scrub witch gore from their weapons, they wonder whether a different, more peaceful life might have been theirs. A broken bar had their parents been able to take care of them. Positive elements. That last bit of introspection isn't really in this movie, just so you know. But there is at least one other positive worth mentioning. Hansel and Gretel routinely risk their lives to take down the worst of their land's evil denizens, saving whatever children might need saving while they're at it. Their moxie inspires others to chip in, too. Mina, a lovely villager who was nearly burned as a witch herself, an ogre who previously served in the nefarious coven of a certain powerful witch named Muriel, a youth who hopes to become a witch hunter himself one day. While none of these characters are necessarily paragons of virtue, they do what in the movies troubled if there's a must be done. Spoiler warning. It's important to note that Hansel and Gretel's parents didn't just desert their kids because they wanted to go play the slots somewhere. Turns out, their mother was a good witch who sensed that villagers were coming to kill her, so she casts a spell to permanently protect her children from bad witch magic and sends them away for their own safety, leaving herself at the mercy of the mob. The concept of good witches is always problematic, of course, but we must still laud Mom for doing a supremely motherly thing here. They died to save you, Muriel snidely tells Gretel and Hansel. And when another white witch sacrifices herself to save Hansel, Muriel declares her pathetic. We, naturally, would beg to differ. Spiritual elements. Hansel Gretel, witch hunter, is filthy with witches. We've already established that. But just what sorts of witches are they? That's a more ticklish question. Most of them are flat out bad, so bad that we see them attempt to sacrifice children and others under a blood red than most unholy holiday these witches have seen for several years. And we know that first witch Hansel and Gretel encountered loved to eat kids. Someone refers to the witches as spawn of Satan. We later learn of the existence of the so-called white witches. They don't look ugly. They don't use their magic for evil. In fact, we rarely see them use magic at all. But we know that when they bless weapons, those weapons are far more effective on run-of-the-mill evil witches. And while practicing white sorcery still involves spell books and such, becoming a white witch is less a matter of choice and more a matter of heredity in Hansel and Gretel's world. Spoiler warning. which explains why the evil witches are so keen on capturing the Sibs. Muriel hopes to make herself, and her sisters, invulnerable to fire, and thus nigh invincible, but to work this delicate piece of magic, she needs the heart from a great white witch. Gretel is that witch, even though Gretel herself doesn't realize it until Muriel is actively trying to remove her heart from her ribcage. Theologically, then, these witches are in a pickle. Sometimes they reflect a traditional Christian understanding of witchcraft. At others, they seem to embody a more naturalist understanding of magic, ever so slightly akin to Harry Potter. And then you've got elements of either a yin-yang or good versus evil showdown, a battle between inherently light and inherently dark creatures that doesn't have much to do with witchcraft, as typically understood, at all. A man about to be killed by a witch says, "Please, God, number," to which the witch responds, "Even your God knows better than to come here." A woman crosses herself before getting shot. We see occult-looking texts and charts, sexual romantic content. Monitus robes and wades, naked, into a pool of healing water, and we see both her exposed breasts and backside. She invites Hansel to join her, which he does. The two begin kissing in the pool before the camera turns its attention elsewhere. The next time we see the lovers, they're getting dressed, with Mina asking Hansel if he might visit her again should he be in the area. Ben, a young wannabe witch hunter, cares for an unconscious Gretel, swabbing her face with a wet cloth. His focus shifts ever lower until he begins dabbing the swell of her breasts, administrations that are quickly terminated when Gretel revives. Violent content. Muriel casts a spell on a would-be tracker, causing strange grub-like things to crawl under his skin. We see them skitter under his forehead. He later walks into a tavern, delivers a message, and then literally explodes, showering blood and gore on everyone there. Muriel captures another man via forest tendrils, which lasso his arms, legs and head and literally pull him apart. An ogre crushes one man's head like a grape and stomps another's head into the ground like a pumpkin, spraying blood everywhere. And witches themselves apparently bleed just like everybody else. Hansel and Mina blast a massive sabbat full of witches with steampunk weaponry. Some of the witches are obliterated by a hail of blessed bullets. Others are painfully skewered or hacked apart. A few, flying away, are sliced into nugget-sized bits of meat when they hit a web of lethal wire strung up between trees. One is crushed by a falling pine. Hansel and Gretel behead a witch with a shovel. Witch versus witch hunter battles are filled with flying fists and feet and whole bodies. Participants dodge, or sometimes don't, inexhaustible numbers of blades and arrows and bullets and magical flying projectiles. And since in this movie's ethos witches are always female, most of this violence is perpetrated against, and often by, women. A witch, via magic, forces a boy to shoot his own mother and a man to commit suicide with a shotgun. A man struggles as he hangs from a noose. His wife burns in a fire beyond. Dogs attack and kill their masters. Hansel is painfully dragged, via broomstick, through a forest, winding up high in a tree. He escapes by falling hard to the ground. Gretel headbutts a sheriff, making his nose spurt blood. Later, she nearly bites the guy's schnoz right off, which generates even more gushing blood. An ogre is revived through primitive shock therapy. Folks get stabbed. Children are threatened. A witch is thrown into an oven and burned alive. We see cartoon depictions of witch exterminations. A witch is brutally interrogated, involving punches to her face, leaving her bloody. A witch holds her hand over an open flame until it begins to hurt her. A half-dozen F-words and about the same number of S-words. A variety of milder profanities include A', boy ch, the an and A'. We hear one or two misuses of God's name. Conclusion. Hansel Gretel, Witch Hunters is a dumb, kitschy, sloppy, salacious bit of filmmaking. There is no real character development. There's barely a plot. This movie makes SpongeBob SquarePants look like a work by Tolstoy instead of a solid narrative. Then, there's lots and lots and lots of blood. The flimsy flick wallows in it, splashes through it, practically drowns under the weight of it. I can only echo the sentiments surely voiced by the unhappy village's underpaid sanitation specialists after one of many nearby battles. What a mess. Policy has been part of the plugged-in staff since 2007, watching and reviewing roughly 15 quintillion movies and television shows. He's written for a number of other publications, too, including Time, The Washington Post and Christianity Today. The author of several books, Paul loves to find spirituality in unexpected places, including popular entertainment, and he loves all things superhero. His vices include James Bond films, Mountain Dew and terrible B-grade movies. He's married, has 2 children and a neurotic dog, runs marathons on occasion and hopes to someday own his own tuxedo. Feel free to follow him on Twitter @Paul. Hansel and Gretel, Witch Hunters is an unapologetic butt kicker that was unjustly decapitated by critics in 2013, but has found overdue appreciation from the less constipated public. High Buzz was once again ahead of the Queen Bee stings. They ate up the dark horror comedy mayhem to the tune of a $226,300,000 worldwide gross, vanquishing the $50 million layout. Garrett yourself for some blood-drenched non-stop action, wicked self-aware humor and a first-rate visual imaging of make-believe medieval mayhem. It's nasty, it's all wrong. It doesn't care and it works. Nor was Tommy Wirkola directed the fury and wrote the tongue-in-cheek script which keeps the centuries-old time period and Germanic forest setting of the 1812 Brothers Grimm tale, one whose misty origins may date back to the 1300s, a good time to be from. He updates the brother-sister heroes by giving them modern-style weaponry, with the retro look and contemporary profanity to toss around between bruising bolts. Jeremy Renner and Gemma Arterton make for viable action figures as the haunted but hardy duo, squaring off against Grand Witch Muriel, Famke Janssen, relishing her utter evil, and her coterie of yucky followers. In play are a brutish sheriff, Peter Stormare, coarse as he's ever been, a good white witch, Pila Vietila, a game apprentice witch-whacker, Thomas Mann, and a lonesome troll, Derek Mears, voiced by Robin Atkin Downs. Mercy is a few centuries in the future. Location shooting was done in a forest outside Berlin and around the city of Braunschweig. Art direction, stunts, special effects, costumes and props are all praiseworthy. The music score from Aali Avarson keeps the pulse going and writer-director Wirkola, Dead Snow, keeps it all compact at 98 minutes. With Ingrid Bowles, Atilda Sedilla Berdal, Joanna Kulig, Rainer Bach and Monique Ganderton, as the original kid-eating candy house crone. The script makes Hansel a diabetic due to all the sugar he was forced to consume as her captive. Cinematography by Michael Bonvillain. The dish it out and take it attitude brought it to 37th place in 2013. Normally I'm not too big on these campy gore fests, but this unpretentious stomp mostly did it upright. The Wumpus critics were dead wrong. If they sneer, bake 'em. New in theaters this week is the first big-budget Hollywood production from the Norwegian director of the horror comedy Dead Snow, Tommy Wirkola. The horror, fairy tale reinvention Hansel Gretel, Witch Hunters. Jeremy Renner and Gemma Arterton star as the legendary siblings. In this version of the story the two have become full-blown witch hunters after disposing of the witch in the candy house of the original fairy tale. But can Hansel and Gretel match the absurdly fun Abraham Lincoln, Vampire Hunter, from last year? On the enjoyment scale, after getting a taste for blood as children, Hansel, Renner, and Gretel, Arterton, have devoted their lives on their hell-bent retribution against all witches. Now, unbeknownst to them, Hansel and Gretel have become the hunted, and must face a nemesis far greater than the average witch. As the fabled blood moon approaches, the siblings encounter a new form of evil that might hold a secret to their past. Along the way the pair must deal with an overbearing sheriff, Stormare, a pair of determined admirers in Ben, Man, and Mina, Vietila, and a troll, Mears, named Edward, in league with the evil witch Muriel, Jansen. Hansel and Gretel, Witch Hunters is not a good movie. It's ludicrous and ridiculous in concept and sadly does not know exactly what to do with it. The film languishes in the middle, not pulling back enough to be taken seriously and not going far enough over the top to be considered a full-out tongue-in-cheek romp. Unlike last year's Abraham Lincoln, Vampire Hunter, Hansel and Gretel lacks charm and the lovable goofiness of the presidential supernatural flick. The scripter and direction play a major part here, as director Werkla seems to be afraid to let his cast go completely over the top. You can almost see the reins being pulled back on the actors, steering them directly towards straight-line readings on dialogue so perverse in parts it's practically screaming for an ironic, comedic delivery. In fact, Starmer seems to be the only one getting exactly what he is supposed to be doing here, devilishly smiling and sneering throughout and screaming almost 50% of his dialogue until his admittedly fine demise. But that brings us to the biggest issue on display here. The total miscasting of Jeremy Renner. Arterton's turn as Gretel is actually very satisfying, especially considering the limitations of the script she was presented with. It's Renner as Hansel that really lets the film down. Renner seems to lack the ability to just completely cut loose and go comedic. His punchline delivery is uninspired and does not work, and as a result spends the film mainly in a gloomy, moody haze that he hops out of for action sequences then drops right back into. Adding to this is the phoned-in performance of Famke Janssen as our main villain. Janssen seems disinterested, as if he were under the influence of marijuana, throughout the film and in the end lacks any real gravitas as a foil for Hansel and Gretel. The special effects work is one of the highlights here as there are many aspects that impress. The legendary A House of Candy is a visual treat when we first see it, and looks grimy and unkempt when we see it later on. Hansel and Gretel's arsenal is quite impressive, including Hansel's modified shotgun and Gretel's souped-up crossbow, and the weapons cache used in this final showdown is impressive as is the damage it delivers. But the real highlight here is the work done with Edward. Edward looks impressive and immense, but also becomes endearing and a crowd favorite. Ultimately Hansel and Gretel, Witch Hunters is a shiny-looking wrapper with an empty center. It lacks the substance at the heart of the film to truly engage for more than moments at a time. With content and aspects of production that do work, the film seems like a rudderless ship that constantly drifts back towards the areas that don't work. Hansel and Gretel, Witch Hunters is a non-recommend. Till next time, movie junkie, to make sure to keep up with what's going on at Entertainment Maven by liking our Facebook page and having updates delivered right to your Facebook news feed. It's the only way to stay on top of all of our articles with the newest blockbusters and all the upcoming films, festivals and film-related events in Toronto. Principal cast: Jeremy Renner, Gemma Arterton, Famke Janssen, Paula Vitlo, Derek Mears, Thomas Mann, Peter Starmer, Rainier Bach, BJ Sedilla Aran Sundquist, Ingrid Bowles Sedilla Burdle, Zoe Bell. Approx running time, 88 minutes. Synopsis: orphaned as children and only barely surviving the evil clutches of a cruel witch, siblings Hansel and Gretel take up hunting witches for bounty. Inevitably, they are led into a showdown with the powerful Grand Witch, who wants to use the onset of a rare blood moon to give the supernatural creatures even more power than before. What we think: violent, kinetic, depraved updating of the Hansel and Gretel story. This film never once stoops to pretension or higher-than-thou filmmaking. This is cornball cheese fantasy at its most slick, a grab bag of death and brutality, coupled with some wry scripting and candy-wrapped performances that elevate the problematic eschewing of logic and reason well above anything serious critics should consider lowbrow. This is popcorn-munching entertainment at its most frivolous, and it's a blast. Something wicked this way explodes. By its very title, you know what to expect. Reviewing this film with anything other than one's tongue planted firmly in one's cheek will only lead to disaster from a critical perspective. A film like Hansel and Gretel, Witch Hunters is beyond the scope of coherent criticism. It's a genre film first and foremost, playing to a crowd to whom the idea of medieval bounty hunters modeled on the mythical story of twin children escaping the clutches of an evil, candy house-living witch is merely the window dressing for something of larger scope. Much like 2012's equally insane historical horror romp, Abraham Lincoln, Vampire Hunter, Hansel Gretel's horror roots and glad-handing action ethics will have the hootenanny cheering and the intellect diminishing if only for the briefest time as you thoroughly enjoy this romp. I don't often call a film a romp, but that's exactly what Hansel Gretel is, a bloody, violent, energetic remix of ye olde world and modern sensibility, the kind of film you'd have had Bram Stoker being hopped up on amphetamines when he wrote Dracula. As I said, By its very title you shouldn't be expecting anything serious, nor should you expect literary genius. This is, after all, an adult brand fantasy that delights in its lack of pomposity and excessive action. That being said, there's still some reviewing to be done here, and I'm man enough to admit that, even with its terrific kineticism and gang-busting direction, some kind of constructive critical eye needs to be cast over the whole thing just for a sense of equality. After all, if I can review Oscar-winning masterpieces and still find fault, why not a film like this? After being orphaned as children, siblings Hansel, Jeremy Renner, and Gretel, Gemma Arterton, stalk the European countryside, hunting and killing witches for bounty. They arrive at Augsburg, to stop the local sheriff, Peter Storm, from killing a suspected witch with no proof. Mina Pilavitla takes a liking to Hansel, while Gretel begins to uncover the true source of witchery in the town. A powerful and cruel black witch named Muriel Famke Jensen, who has been stealing children in order to fulfill a prophecy which would see witches resistant to flame, which means no more burning at the stake. Together with a young fan named Ben Thomas Mann, Hansel and Gretel go up against the gathered covens of evil witches to stop the prophecy from coming true, and in doing so, uncover a secret about their lost parents that will change them forever. Big dumb action films don't come much bigger, dumber, or more fun than Hansel Gretel, Witch Hunters. Unlike the majority of stupid genre action films, which usually never quite live up to director Rick Roman. Year of release, 2013. Principal cast: Dwayne Johnson, Barry Pepper, Susan Sarandon, Benjamin Bratt, John Bernthal, Michael Kenneth Williams, Rafi Gavin, Melina Kanakaridze, David Harbour. Approx running time, 112 minutes. Synopsis: after his son is imprisoned for suspected drug dealing, a working-class businessman strikes a deal with the district attorney to provide arrests in major drug syndicate rings to reduce the mandatory sentence. What we think, crackerjack premises mishandled by director Wah. Although that's not the fault of lead star Dwayne Johnson, the leaden pacing mitigates the tension of the film, coupled with an inability by the script to really handle the miscarriage of justice on display here, and the end result is a movie that's strikingly filmed, well acted by most, with the exception of Sarandon, who plays her part like she's in a kid's film, and typically well produced, but lacks a certain frisson to excite the viewer. Not entirely worthless, but certainly below par. Kids, don't do drugs. As a vocal non-fan of the American justice system, and all its iniquities, a film like Sneesh is something of an eye-opener. Probably not as much as director Rick Roman might have liked, but an eye-opener nonetheless. The issue of drugs in America is something that's been long a focal point for filmmakers. Director Steven Soderbergh snagged an Oscar for his take on the issue, with Traffic. But the core ingredient in the drug flick genre has typically been more oriented around the action crime genre. Snitch tries its hand at being both a drama and an action film, and while I'd love to report that it does both equally well, the fact is that the entire movie never quite kicks into high gear. Not for lack of trying, mind you, especially with a decent leading role performance by former WWE star Dwayne Johnson. It's a strangely inept mix of drama and action, with little actual drama and only a marginally interesting sense of action, which prevents Snitch from being the indictment on American law it could have been. John Matthews, Dwayne Johnson, gets a call from his ex-wife, Melina Kanakaridze, to find his eldest son, Jason, Rafi Gavin, has been set up by one of his friends with the package of drugs that de-incarcerates him for the state's minimum mandatory sentence of 10 years. Trying to find a way to reduce the sentence so his son doesn't end up dead while inside, John decides to help the district attorney, Keegan, Susan Sarandon, in her quest to get elected to Congress via a platform of drug control. John uses the knowledge of one of his employees, an ex-drug criminal named Daniel, John Bernthal, to set him up with a meet to get an inside track on the drug trade. Daniel, himself looking to escape his criminal past and care for his young family, begrudgingly hooks him up with local kingpin Wallach, Michael Kenneth Williams, who in turn arranges a deal with a drug cartel boss known as El Topo, Benjamin Bratt. As the drug deals become more valuable, Keegan and her chief D agent, Cooper, Barry Pepper, use John for their own political agenda, although John isn't without a few plans of his own. One of the most abhorrent things I took away from this film was the misalignment of the U.S. justice system with regards to drugs. Currently, the U.S. law states that drug trafficking results in a mandatory minimum jail sentence of 10 years, while many other crimes, such as rape and manslaughter, carry much more lenient sentencing possibilities. It's this crucial idea to which Snitch evolves as a dramatic work. A man's son is framed as a drug mule, gets sentenced for the 10 years, and the father must do whatever he can to have him released, even if it means risking his own life. Snitch is apparently inspired by a true story, which allows for embellishments and changes for the sake of dramatic effect, and to a degree, works well enough as an indictment on this disproportionate level of punishment. As a dramatic film, it's a little too unfocused, and as an action film, there's too few sequences to raise the pulse beyond a steady stationary rate of beat, but in amongst the weak plotting, occasionally generic characterization, and somewhat inept direction, a rough diamond lurks for those willing to endure it. Key to the film is the performance of the Rock a Broken Bar. Dwayne Johnson. Without Johnson's charisma, without his solid, don't blink performance as John Matthews, this film would be a disaster. Johnson's magnetic screen persona lifts what is a relatively pedestrian film above mediocrity, but only just. I really enjoy Johnson's roles generally, and even if he's in films that suck, at least you know with Johnson, he's giving it 100%. Snitch is no different. Surrounded by a story that wanders between family drama, crime genre archetypes and subpar action elements, Johnson can stand proud and tall and say with certainty that the failure of this film to connect with audiences had little to do with him. He's surrounded by able participants, including a bizarrely inadequate Susan Sarandon, a solid Barry Pepper, sporting one hell of a weird-ass beard, and a softly John Bernthal, but none of them are able to do anything with their limited roles. Bernthal probably comes off the best, with some time given to establishing his family and his life circumstance, a way of giving his own personal journey something of weight as the story progresses. It's a good effort to try this, but it means the focus comes of Johnson, and that when the film fizzles. Rick Romanwalt isn't a director I'd heard of, so I had no expectations going into Snitch, but I'm left wondering if the guy wasn't a little out of his depth here. Whilst direction lacks excitement, lacks tension, and just plain lacks energy, the script doesn't allow for a lot of excitement a lot of the time, especially with the faux dramatic posturing from the cast as they wiggle into the positions they need to for the story to make sense. It's like we couldn't find the real focus of the film. Is it on Johnson's character, or Bernthal? Is the key to the film the fact that Johnson's son is locked in prison unjustly, or is it an excuse to get The Rock once again into a film with action in it? The script is key, and while it bubbles along with their honest and reality I appreciated, its pacing is turgid and the character is largely unlikable. Johnson aside, nobody in this film is really approachable from an empathy perspective. Whilst direction of the action sequences is strangely ineffective too, with the chopsaki editing style which has ruined many a decent film once more rearing its ugly head. I know sacrificing a wide shot and a steady cam can make an action sequence feel more frenetic, but dude, we need to at least see what the hell is going on at some point. An ambush on an early drug run, and a final highway pursuit with gunfire and crashing vehicles, lack cinematic strength, as if this is merely a made-for-TV effort and the budget didn't quite stretch for full-blown cinematography. Snitch is passable as a film, if only for Johnson's performance, which is commendable. As for the rest, including Benjamin Bratt's chuckle-worthy drug kingpin character, you can probably skip it. The film lacks punch, drudges along with its ham-fisted attempts to anger the viewer with a miscarriage of justice, and ends up just kinda being, without doing. As an action film, it lacks action. As a dramatic piece, it's not terribly deep, and as a crime film there's a definite feel of so what about it all? Snitch is hardly a major misfire, but it comes with plenty of caveats for those willing to watch. Rodney has been writing about films for well over 2 decades, appreciates a good wine, the love of his wife and kids, and the affection of his dog and cats. He has a fondness of cheesy 90s action and classic Hollywood, hates that physical media is disappearing, and wishes somebody would make a high-budget series of the never-ending story. Rachel's take on Hansel and Gretel. Witch Hunters 1 o'clock. I have just started watching this movie. All I know about it that Jeremy Renner is in it and that I don't like him that much, and that this story is like a Hansel and Gretel, vampire hunters type of thing. 2:05 Hansel and Gretel just yelled in unison. I heard this movie was bad. Sign number 1. I'm going to start counting those. 3:06 The kids have just found the witch's candy cottage. That just looks like a cavity waiting to happen, and the entrance sort of looks like a rainbow-colored Pokemon mouth. An unfriendly Pokemon mouth. 4:29 Is that the witch? She's actually very frightening. 5:19 I think we're getting a montage-esque rundown of the story of Hansel and Gretel as kids. 6:21 Holy crap, the little girl just said bitch, but not very convincingly. Sign number 2 that this is a crappy movie. 7:08 Which one is Hansel? Which one is Gretel? I don't actually know. 7:39 Apparently Hansel and Gretel are the Batman, as shown by a series of old-timey looking animations, complete with spurting red blood, the only non-sepia color allowed in these animations. 8:24 Maybe I'll try to get into this movie. 8:45 Were Hansel and Gretel a part of those crazy witch hunts? Are we just going to pretend that witches don't exist? 9:45 A very nice-looking ginger woman was just accused of witchcraft. This seems like a false accusation, since witches don't exist. 10:41 Okay, so the accuser is the gung-ho bad guy. The boy in Hansel and Gretel is now doing a routine medical examination to detect whether the ginger is a witch or not. Boy Hansel. Gretel has just announced that she is not a witch. He is correct, as witches do not exist. 12:36 Why don't Jeremy Renner, boy Hansel, Gretel, and girl Hansel, Gretel have English accents while everyone else does? 13:16 Jeremy Renner carries a gun that doesn't look real. Maybe it's just a prop. 13:45 Sign number 3. Crappy high-speed witch chase. It looks like the witch is tumbling through the air on a wire. Now it looks like Jeremy Renner is chasing her on a wire. 15:36 Witches apparently bound like werewolves. 16:39 The main conflict of this movie is being revealed. An inconvenient holy witch event is going to bring all the witches into one place. This seems like a plot device. 18:05 Hansel and Gretel have competition. Ayo. It's the accuser baddie from the beginning who's hired some mercenaries or something. He's wearing an eye patch on his broken nose, from when girl Hansel, Gretel had butted him. 20:02 Jean from X-Men is here. Didn't Wolverine kill her? 20:38 She's not Jean in this movie, she's a witch. 21:42 Jean just put little mummy beetles in one of the mercenaries' heads. 22:16 Jeremy Renner is hitting on a barmaid now. Oh, she rejected him. He's too much of a workaholic apparently. 23:05 It appears that girl Hansel, Gretel is the brains and Jeremy Renner is just the muscle. 23:27 A devoted fan since just addressed Hansel and Gretel as Hansel and Gretel. This makes it very difficult to figure out which one is which. 24:04 Okay, so Jeremy Renner is Hansel. 25:27 Sign number 4. Man exploding into ketchup and these beetles from the mummy. 25:59 Jean has a band of friends who wear clothing from Hot Topic. 27:45 The Hot Topic trio is drinking child remains. This is really true to the Brothers Grimm kind of grim. 29:14 Hansel apparently sleeps on the floor. 30:05 Gretel is having a bunch of foreshadowing dreams. 31:06 Hansel apparently ate so much candy when he was a child that he will die if he doesn't take regular injections of what looks like fruit punch from a giant needle. It's called sugar sickness. That's right, kids, don't eat candy. You'll die like Hansel. This seems like a plot device. 34:07 Maybe more of the movie's budget should have been devoted to its witch flying scenes. 35:36 Apparently tasers existed back in old-timey Europe. What year is it anyway? 36:18 Everyone swears a lot in this movie. 37 hours 8 minutes. Has anyone considered the moral implications of beating these women up? What about their rights? 39 hours 46 minutes. Is this the climax of the movie? 40 hours 48 minutes. A little girl born in April is apparently the last recipe ingredient to make these witches forever young and not have spirally tattoos all over their faces. 43 hours 19 minutes. Here goes another bad witch flying scene. 44 hours 4 minutes. Nope. Gretel is the last recipe ingredient, right after the girl born in April. That's a twist. 45 hours 22 minutes. Hansel just fell like hundreds of feet from the ground and didn't impale himself on a tree. I'm impressed. 46 hours 20 minutes. I just realized I have no idea what's happening in this movie. 46 hours 45 minutes. Devoted fan sense is wiping Gretel down. He's wiping her boobs now. That's incredibly creepy. Is he her love interest? 47 hours 53 minutes. Devoted fan sense has pictures of Gretel, along with a bunch of Hansel and Gretel paraphernalia, in his room. I guess this is the only thing there was to get obsessed with back then. 45 hours 12 minutes. Not too hot, not too cold, just right. Was just used to describe a bowl of porridge. Clearly a nod to the Brothers Grimm. Sign number 5. 50 hours 51 minutes. Hansel clearly needed help but didn't want to ask, so instead he just fell out of the tree he was hanging from. Men. 51 hours 23 minutes. Who is this bad CGI ogre thing? Is he CGI, or just an unconvincing suit? Animatronic. 52 hours 18 minutes. Broken nose. Baddie's nose is healed, and he's beating up Gretel. 52 hours 50 minutes. In the midst of all this, Hansel is getting a sponge bath from the friendly ginger lady. Now she's taking off her dress. Oh, there's her ass. Apparently they need to be naked together in the healing waters to heal. 54 hours 20 minutes. Meanwhile, Gretel is getting her ass kicked by a group of like 6 men. 55 hours 0 minutes. Who is this ogre guy? Like actually, he's watching Gretel get beaten up like he has a soul or something. 55 hours 49 minutes. And Hansel is having sex in the healing waters. 56 hours 4 minutes. Gretel has gotten her nose kicked about 5 times already. Now she's about to get gang raped. Way to be a helpful brother, Hansel. 56 hours 46 minutes. Luckily, the friendly ogre is here to the rescue since Hansel is too busy healing in the healing waters. 57 hours 56 minutes. Hansel has finally gotten around to putting his clothes back on. Now he's all I have to find my sister and she's like super important to me. 58 hours 27 minutes. What? Are there healing waters everywhere? The ogre has brought Gretel to another pond of similarly magical powers. 59 hours 30 minutes. The ogre is a troll, not an ogre, and his name is Edward. Reminds me of Twilight, unhappily so. Maybe this is Gretel's love interest. We can't all be like Hansel and have ginger chicks throwing themselves at us in the healing waters. 101. Hansel and Gretel have found each other. They awkwardly look like they're about to make out. 101 and 47 seconds. Oh, now Hansel is concerned about Gretel's well-being. If only she knew. 102 and 47 seconds. Why do the floorboards in these old house-type places always collapse? 103 and 14 seconds. A twist. Hansel and Gretel have stumbled upon their old house. 104 and 11 seconds. Hansel and Gretel were raised by a witch, Adriana, the Great White Witch. Oh gosh, this twist is too much for me to handle. 105 and 36 seconds. All is being revealed through Jean telling Hansel and Gretel an extended tale of how their mother and father are dead. 107 and 1 second. Gretel is a witch. 107 and 13 seconds. While Jean was telling this story, she could have just been killing Hansel and Gretel. Hansel and Gretel equally could have been using that time to attack Jean, but I guess the audience needed to hear the plot. 108 and 19 seconds. The ginger girl just showed up out of nowhere. Apparently she's a witch, but a good witch. Awkward. Hansel had sex with a witch. 110 and 10 seconds. I feel a climax going on. 110 and 20 seconds. It's montage time. They're blessing Hansel's weapon cache, and the voted fan sense gets to go too, even though his voice keeps cracking. 111 and 26 seconds. This troll named Edward is a little too much for me to handle. 113 and 4 seconds. It's a witch party. Everyone is wearing their best Hot Topic outfits. Jean even used the taser whip to light the fireplace. Everything is bigger, Badder, more impressive than it was 30 minutes ago. 1:14 and 56 seconds. This is like a costume party. Fun. 1:15 and 50 seconds. Zoom. I'm getting ready for an epic fight scene. 1:16 and 12 seconds. Nah, it's just Hansel and the Ginger Witch shooting at everyone with holy machine guns. Oh no, the Ginger Witch's holy machine gun got jammed. 1:17 and 35 seconds. Edward saved the day. 1:18 and 14 seconds. I think Edward just got thrown off a cliff. Why do witches like to live on cliffs? 1:18 and 36 seconds. Hansel is fighting conjoined twin witches. He should feel lucky. Twins. 1:19 and 37 seconds. Oh, the fight scene finally got epic. 1:19 and 51 seconds. It's over now. 1:20. Jean is getting away, and Gretel's primary concern is to help Edward. I think Hansel accurately represented all viewers' thoughts when he said, "Who the fuck is Edward?" 1:21 and 32 seconds. I honestly don't care about Edward. 1:22 and 3 seconds. They had defibrillators in the past. You had to wind them up, but they existed, according to this movie, since Edward was just brought back to life by 1:23 and 6 seconds. They're back at the candy house from the beginning. 1:23 and 55 seconds. Which versus which? Yeah, cat fight. 1:24 and 31 seconds. That's sad. I think she just died. Do they have a defibrillator for that? 1:25 and 32 seconds. Hansel just dove and rolled into the candy house. There was absolutely no need for him to dive and roll. Is it really that uncool to just walk in? 1:26 and 24 seconds. Prediction: Jean the witch will be burned in the oven like the last witch. 1:28 and 9 seconds. Hansel apparently needed his fruit punch injection right in the middle of this fight scene. That was wildly inconvenient. 1:28 and 50 seconds. I was wrong about the oven. They shoveled her head off. 1:29 and 57 seconds. Devoted fauna sense gets to be a part of the Hansel and Gretel franchise. Edward too, since they need someone to pull along the cart of dead bodies. 1:30 and 41 seconds. The final fight scene is a part of the credits. I don't know how I feel about this movie. I'm probably not going to watch it again.